And Amy, so people discussing hopes and expectations of the Trump administration. Interesting rundown in the Wall Street Journal today of some accomplished thinkers chiming in on this question. Charles Koch, now is the time to reverse our nation's trajectory toward a two-tiered society that benefits the wealthy and well-connected. That's Charles Koch, one of the world's richest men, saying that. It's very interesting because we saw this on display this week with Betsy DeVos during her hearing for Education Secretary, her confirmation hearing. Betsy DeVos, also part of a very successful family, very wealthy. And what's been her focus the last 30 years? Opportunity scholarships, better educational options for poor children, disproportionately poor minority children. Another individual who's done very well in life, very successful, who's also spent most of his life through media properties and other channels, advocating for opportunity for those that don't have it, talking about this two-tiered system that Charles Koch is referring to, advocating on behalf of the so-called deplorables that upended the Democrat hegemony in D.C. is Steve Forbes, and we're pleased to have Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief Forbes, also, of course, former Republican presidential candidate and co-author of the book Reviving America, join us now. Steve, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
So why don't we start there, kind of flying off of what Charles Koch and others had said. What are your hopes and expectations for the Trump administration?
Well, I think the new president's going to be made it very clear he's going to do big things right from the start. Health care, get rid of Obamacare and get more patient-oriented policies in. Where the patient's in charge, not Washington bureaucrats, get off the backs of small businesses, deregulation, and also a pretty big tax cut. And I think he wants to move fast on the tax cut. And the one fly in the ointment in all of this comes not from the Democrats, but from the Republicans on the tax front. The Republicans in the House of Representatives, at least some of them like Paul Ryan, as part of this tax bill they want a big new tax that's going to tax American consumers $110 billion a year. They call it the border adjustability tax.
Yeah.
Try to get your mouth around that one. And it's going to cost American consumers more money. Like you go to the gas pump, this new tax will raise your gasoline prices 30 cents a gallon. And they say, well, we need the money for tax cuts. Well, I've got a message for these guys. One, if you do a good tax cut like Reagan did, the economy improves and you get revenues. And number two, guys, how about doing a little heavy lifting on restraining wasteful spending?
I want to explore this with you because we've had this running debate with Steve Moore on this very topic of the border adjustment tax. And you have a good free market conservatives divided on this. It's like Moore and Laffer on one side and people like you and Larry Kudlow on the other side. And many others. And one of the arguments that Moore makes is essentially this is to, quote unquote, level the playing field, always a dangerous phrase when it's employed, particularly by conservatives. That usually is an indication of a sellout coming. But the idea that how American companies are taxed by foreign countries as opposed to how America taxes those who are importing goods into this country, and this is part of, Trump's, I would say, neo-mercantilist philosophy. It's consistent with that, but this is a way to blunt the impact of just doing straight-away tariffs, as Trump has shown some openness to. What do you say to that in response to that argument?
Well, one, in terms of trade abuses, you can do specific remedies for specific trade abuses. We have remedies on the books. Obama never used them. And if we need new ones, we can get new ones for specific problems. But to punish all of the American people, consumers, because of some trade abuses by the Chinese is ridiculous. Why are we raising prices for all of the American people? That's what this so-called border adjustment tax means, 30 cents a gallon at the pump. You go to Target, you go to a Walmart and other stores, you're going to pay more. You buy cars, you're going to pay more. So to get back at foreigners, we're going to punish American consumers. That is just bizarre. And there's another part of this border adjustability tax is they're going to subsidize exporters. So if you sell $1 million a piece of machinery to Iran, that $1 million is tax-free to you. So we're going to give tax-free benefits to the Iranians, the Chinese, and others, and we're going to punish American consumers. I just think that's the wackiest thing I've heard in a long time.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
And what do you think about Donald Trump? Whenever he tweets about a company, their stock prices, they don't bottom out, but they fall precipitously. Is that fair to that one American company, whether it be Ford or Chrysler?
Well, what I think he's been doing there is just focusing on that there's going to be new focus on investment in America. And he knows that trying to get companies not to go overseas, that'll have some success. But the key thing is, and he knows this, if you reduce the corporate tax rate in this country, which is now the worst in the world, developed world, from 35% down to 15%, we become a magnet for investment. We reduce other tax rates. We get off the backs of the American individuals. And you'll see money pouring into this country because we'll be like we were in the 80s, a place in which good things, innovative things will be happening. Not only will it mean keeping more of what you earn, but it means we're going to have more job creation, better job creation. And we've done this before, and I think Trump wants to do it again. And why muck it up by putting in a new tax, which, as you know, when the Democrats get back in, as someday they will, they're going to run wild with this thing like they have in Europe with the value-added taxes.
Trump has kind of turned the left's traditional class envy politics on its head, really marginalized the political effectiveness of that outside the Beltway. A concern I have is that it still has currency with some Republicans who are less than stout of heart. Do you see the real threat to the Trump policy agenda coming from Democrats playing their usual games, as you've seen in these confirmation hearings I mentioned at the outset with Betsy DeVos, playing class envy politics, billionaires and all that jazz. They don't mind their billionaires, but they don't like our billionaires. Is that the real concern, the real threat, or is it from weak-kneed establishment Republicans?
It's the latter, weak-kneed establishment Republicans who are starting to get a little timid. Oh, we've got to go slow. We can't go too fast. And I think Trump will have zero tolerance for that kind of thing. But you see it with that. With Obamacare, it would take 3 years to do it. No, you start now, and you build month by month. But you start right now. Do big. Same thing with tax cuts. And the last thing you do on the tax front is divide your own base. One group of people against another group of people. Boeing loves this new border adjustability tax because it means they'll be tax-free for decades to come. So why divide your own forces on a new tax when a little bit of spending restraint and a good tax cut, this economy gets moving? And the American people don't much care what the Congressional Budget Office says about these things or what Paul Ryan says about these things. They want to know, is my paycheck going up? Are my job prospects improving? And if you get a good tax cut through now, make it retroactive to Jan 1, by golly, people will see right away. Things are moving in a new, good direction.
What do you think is the most likely unanticipated threat, that economic crisis, if you will, that will visit Trump in the next 4 years? I'm thinking about the student loan bubble. I'm thinking about unfunded pension liabilities at the state, local level. I'm thinking about, frankly, re-blowing up the housing bubble 7, 8 years later. Doesn't seem we've learned the lesson of Fannie and Freddie completely or even partially. Those areas, and then unfunded liabilities with entitlement programs at the federal level too. Which of those areas, or maybe one that I didn't mention, do you think is getting to critical mass and is going to have to be dealt with in a material way by this administration?
Well, you're going to have, talking about crisis, you're going to have foreign crises. The Italian banks are in trouble. Greece is in trouble again, so you may get a blow-up overseas. And here at home, we know about the student disaster, which is why I think Betsy DeVos is going to be an excellent education secretary and stop the rising bloat in the administration of American universities, among other things. And in terms of unfunded liabilities for things like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, if you have a booming economy, that gives you the assets and the wherewithal to make positive changes for younger people. You don't have to take away benefits from people who are on these programs or about to go on them. And on health care, if you get a more patient-oriented health care market, a lot of those rising costs will stop. You know, you see it in little areas right now, like LASIK surgery for eyes, which is less today than it was 10 years ago, because you don't have all this bureaucracy in between the patient and the doctor. You see it in cosmetic surgery. You see it in other areas. I'll just give you one little quick example. In Oklahoma, there's a hospital called the Surgery Center of Oklahoma. Huge place, very successful. But you know what they do? They don't take insurance. Their costs are so low and the quality is so high that the state of Oklahoma is now urging its own state employees to do surgery at this center because it's cheaper than what they can get on Medicaid.
And
that is what.
And with the Oklahoma Surgery Center, I'm sorry to interrupt. With that center, I'm glad you brought that up. They also have a menu of prices. I mean, the way you've distilled the healthcare problem in America is great. You've got this kind of 2-point way of describing it that I've stolen and used as my own, which is two things. One, you know, in every other business in America, when you have more demand than supply, that's called an opportunity. In healthcare, we call it a crisis. And then, you know, every other business in America, you know what the price is. The customer knows the price of a good or a service. It's only in healthcare where we have no idea. Nobody knows.
That's right. And just one little example. A few months ago, I was in New Hampshire, met with an entrepreneur who was told a couple of years ago by a cardiologist he needed a thing called a nuclear stress test, some kind of heart stress test. And he asked the doc what it cost. The doc said, don't worry, it's covered by insurance. This guy went out and got prices in the New England region from 25 different clinics and hospitals. And you know what the prices range from?
What?
$1,400 to $7,300.
Right, right.
And that's why you need transparency. And that's where I think the Trump reforms will move in that direction. And so patients start to find out what they're getting for their money, which is all to the good.
He is Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief, Forbes Media, former Republican presidential candidate, co-author of the book Reviving America. Steve, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dan. I really like it. Thank you. Thank you.
I hope to have you back soon. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.